Oh, hi there, big boys, and welcome to my review of The Fall for Nintendo Switch. This is the first of a sort of series of point-and-clicky adventure shooter games, I guess. They're pretty interesting. I mean, I've only played the first one. It's a decent enough game. It's got this very nice, smooth-looking graphics, and it runs at 60 a lot of the time, which I was a big fan of, firstly. I'm just going to point that out. The graphics are quite, not really low poly, but they're not particularly high poly either, but they, yeah, I quite like them. They're quite shiny, everything looks quite nice, but it also runs quite well. So that's all good. Good on that front. So well done on the Switch port, everyone. Well, anyway, we'll get to something about the controls later. But anyway, so yeah, it's a side-scrolling adventure game. There's some shooting where you have a gun, and you press a button, and you shoot people. And you can also get behind cover, but it doesn't really work very well. Makes the whole system. It just doesn't really work that well. But luckily, the game's more about the adventure and climbing about and investigating stuff, except the controls for that aren't great either. The main problem in this game I've got really is the fact the controls are not really very good. Everything's quite sort of like sticky, I want to say, or like it just doesn't feel quite right, and sometimes you end up doing the wrong action. Well, quite frequently you end up doing the wrong action, and yeah, especially when you get into the combat and it just feels wrong, it just doesn't work. Luckily there's a couple of bits where the combat's barely in the game, but when it is in the game, they're not particularly hard, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And worst comes to worst, you can stay behind cover, never get shot, and you'll be fine. You can wait for your shield to come back. Yeah, about 3 hours long, so not particularly long. I reckon you could probably speedrun this game in about an hour maybe, so but it took me about 3 hours to beat. And it was quite an enjoyable game. To be fair, I did enjoy my time with it, especially because there's quite a lot of physics-based puzzles and stuff. Well, not really physics-based, but they fake physics, you know, that sort of thing. And walking around. To be fair, I expected the world to be bigger because after I beat the sort of basically two areas of the game. The first area is really short, and the second one's quite large. But I kind of expected them to be like more sort of split up a bit. It was kind of surprising when it's actually just one big massive place, which means it's quite easy to get lost in. So keep that in mind. There's no map either, so you know that's a bit of a problem. And it can be a bit confusing at times. Some of the puzzles are a bit confusing, but the game does give pretty decent hints because you've got this little torch that you can flash on stuff, and it'll tell you more or less what that thing will do, and if you can interact with it in any way, and if you should interact with it in any way. That's pretty good. There's also a few choices in the story, so that's good. I mean, it's an interesting story about AI and stuff like that. And yeah, there are a few choices, very small choices, but you know, and the ending was, well, it was an ending, I suppose, but you can tell it was sort of a bit of a cliffhanger, really. But it was okay. It's certainly not a bad little story, anyway, especially for such a small runtime. And what else is there to say? The controls are really finicky, as I said. Yeah, because you can point at something, and then you can interact with it. You can either use network on it, you can either inspect it, or you can use an item on it, or you can pick up something from it. To me, it makes more sense just to swap out the pickup option with just whatever item you've got, if an item can be interacted with it, because I know that makes it a bit easier. To be fair, I mean it does make it quite a bit easier, but really, people who aren't going to know how to solve a puzzle, they're going to be trying every item on it anyway. So you might as well just go through get rid of the short, just sort of middleman and just do it, and it makes the controls a bit better. Yeah, especially when you moving the camera left and right, it just doesn't feel right. It always seems to go up or down more than you expect. I don't know, a bit odd. Also, a little trick for you here. Look under the elevator at the start of the game, because that took me a while to figure out the fact you could go underneath that without dying, 'cause I thought it was going to kill you. Yeah, there's only 3 types of enemies in the game, which isn't really very good, and one of them doesn't really interact with you, and it's just sort of there. Yeah, a bit odd. I do feel like this game, I mean, the game doesn't feel like it's been cut off, but it certainly feels a bit more like a prelude, and more like a, you know, this feels a bit like a demo, basically. It doesn't feel like it's not everything's there, but you know, puzzles are quite clever though. I quite like the puzzles. No, there are a few sort of stupid ones which I had to Google, but overall I think the game was relatively straightforward, so that's good. At least not too bad. But yeah, it was a decent enough game. I did enjoy my time with it for sure, and the Switch port's really good. As I said, so I think you'd be happy to play it on Switch, and I'd love to play the sequel. To be honest, I'm curious about how that develops on it. Hopefully it improves the controls a bit, because yeah, the controls are my least favourite part of the game, for sure, because the exploration was fun. The combat had its moments of being fairly interesting once you got past the controls, and the story was pretty good, so the voice editing was decent as well. So yeah, I would recommend this game. So thanks for watching, big boys, it's an important time, and bye!